This is the most I've ever been invested in Georgia counties.
Are you recording this?
Yeah, we started.
This is the pre-roll stuff.
We need some great pre-roll. Pat, hit me with something great for the pre-roll. All right, Here we go. Good try. Let's do it.
You're listening to Come At Me Show. Waiting champ. Tim Keck.
Timothy Keck. You're listening to
Come At Me Show.
Come At Me Show. Basketball shorts.
Come At Me Show.
Did we say the show was good?
Hey, everybody. You are listening to Come At Me Show here on a Thursday night, Friday morning. We're recording on Thursday night. Boy, oh boy, thought we'd be doing some after the election analysis, but we are still in the heart of it, still in the thick of it. It's too close to call, but it's kind of called. It seems like Biden's going to win. Knock on wood. I'm knocking on all the wood right now. So I'm back. I'm back here to give you the hard-hitting political analysis that got me my first 2-star rating on Apple Podcasts. And of course, with me as always to discuss political ventures is my buddy Pat Wise. Pat or Patrick? Which one do you?
You know, tonight you can call me Georgia Peach.
Okay, Pat. You. Here we are talking election pod after the fact. You know, I feel still like I'm
still in the middle of it, the fact, but sure.
Still in the fact. We're still in the thick of it. It feels like Biden's going to come out knocking on more wood.
Okay.
I feel like I've been a monolith of moderation so far in this. I don't know. Talking about the debates, I'm always like, oh, yeah, you know, I try to understand everybody's side. I want to know what everybody's thinking from. But I got to tell you, I was filled with just absolute rage on Tuesday at the sheer number of fucking morons who voted for this monster. All right. And again, I totally get it. Like if some people are just like, whatever, we can go into the reasons and all that, but I
think we should.
Instinctively, I think we will. We'll be spending a lot of time on that. But just my gut reaction, I was still shocked at the sheer number of people who voted for a man who used tear gas on American citizens so he could take a picture in front of a church he's never been to. The sheer volume of people who came out in support of a man who told like racist groups to stand down and stand by, the sheer audacity of these people crawling out of the woodwork for this man who has just been trying to invalidate the whole electoral process this entire time. I mean, it shook me. This guy. OK, I had some numbers. This is like the first time I've actually done research for this show. You know, the highest number of voter turnout in the popular vote was who? Barack Obama, 2008, 69,000. Trump is on track to at least be the third highest like popular vote recipient ever. He might pass Obama, who won in 2008 with 69. Trump got so many votes. The second or third highest number of votes ever cast for a presidential candidate are going to Trump in this potentially losing effort. You know, it's shocking to me. It's shocking to me that more people than before are voting for this guy. Like, did we learn anything? What the polls didn't seem like this was going to happen.
Right. Well, there's a lot. There's a lot to talk about.
Right.
Here's the thing. Let me start with the good stuff. I think it is good that more people came out, and I said more people voted for Trump than did. Good. But more people came out and more people voted. Period. Our election participation is an embarrassment. It has been an embarrassment for a long time. We have a 50, sometimes 40% participation rate in these elections. Yeah. We're going to hit, they're saying like 60, maybe percent in that range.
60% of eligible voters in this country
who actually
participated in the process.
Yes. Which is disgusting. It
sucks, man.
An embarrassment. And you got to think that if more people voted in general, I mean, we're seeing with this, like, you know, we are very divided. We're definitely very divided. We're probably more divided than people realized. A lot of states went further right, and a lot of states went further left. And counties that we expected to win, we won, and counties that we didn't expected to win, we lost. And so there's a lot to talk about. I do think it is good, though. I think it is good, though, that more people voted, period.
We've kind of talked about this through the debates, is that one candidate and one party really doesn't want people voting, and the other party really wants as many people to have access to voting as possible. And I would always, encourage everybody to vote and exercise their right. I think the thing that was shocking was the sheer number of people who were voting specifically for this guy. Not necessarily in I don't know. I think I was way more negative on Tuesday about just oh my God, everyone who voted for him is a moron. And it's I think it's way more complicated than that. I think it is. Right. I think it's a lot of the media. I think it's the Democratic Party in general, at least the people running it, dropping the ball and not doing everything they could have to present the best case to the American people. We've talked the whole time about how Biden's a weak candidate. And you're going to talk about the Senate races and stuff, but it just doesn't seem like they did everything they could to reach everybody.
No. And I don't think that it seems like over the 4 years that Trump has been president, we really haven't gained more voters. We've lost voters. We got more turnout this time. And I think more people voted in general, or more people who didn't vote in 2016 voted this time. I don't know if we converted that many people. I don't think that actually happened. I think that there were some, but I think that it might have been close to a wash of, we converted the states that Hillary lost. We're talking about Wisconsin and Michigan, but they weren't blowouts. Pennsylvania used to be a Democratic stronghold, and it is, they're projecting it as a win, but it's close. I see this as Democrats losing ground.
This is, it's incredibly disappointing as I guess as a Democrat. I don't know. I hate to throw my lot in with this bunch of hooligans.
And that alone is that's interesting, because that, I think, is a lot of people's thought process. Is this election was a referendum on Trump. It was not an election to vote for Joe Biden.
No, they ran back the Hillary strategy with someone that people don't detest in the same way that people straight up detested Hillary. And I think, we're in the kind of the Brooklyn bubble, and here everybody loved Hillary. And it was crazy to say anything about oh, I don't know, man, she's the wife of a president who now, did a lot of kind of fucked up stuff in hindsight, of why is she the liberal voice when we have all these young, diverse voices coming up? Why is it this old woman who called black people super predators? Why is she the best candidate for this job? Why are we running an establishment candidate against this guy who is the Bernie Sanders of the right? There were just a lot of mistakes there. And then they kind of did the same thing where Hillary didn't have a message. There was no reason to vote for Hillary. It was just, you can't vote for Trump. And Joe Biden kind of did the same thing. He's come out with some platforms, but he's walked back a lot of his environmental stuff. And he's definitely not adopting the more liberal leanings of the Democratic Party. It's just I'm a good guy. I'm a good guy and Trump's not. And I'm a guy. And that should win me your vote.
I would also say I don't want to relitigate 2016 for the rest of our lives. But I think that the point is that we are talking about 2016 because 2016 still is alive in a lot of people's minds. So this election, a lot of people are we need to get over 2016. We need to look forward. But it's people are still thinking about it. And Joe Biden was a choice that was a safe choice because we were worried about having another 2016 on our hands. So it still lives in our brains. And obviously you have to talk about how Hillary is a woman and, the biases against her as a woman are, I think, in a lot of ways unfathomable. And also we do not have a mechanism to subvert them. And we are not ready as a country and as a media apparatus to support a female presidential candidate. And I could see that with, we had a bunch of great candidates in the Democratic primary. I don't think anyone really saw a female candidate as a viable option in some ways.
I mean, now I have more sympathy for that than before. I got to tell you, like now, like this week, I'm suddenly thrown to the awareness, like the idea of like, I mean, we could talk about the polls too, how it's like the poll. I don't know a single person who's ever taken a poll. Like, why the fuck are we trusting these polls? I don't know what data they're getting. I don't know what they're saying. They just come out with these numbers and we're all like, cool, Nate Silver, this will be great. They clearly don't know what the fuck they're talking about. Yeah. These pollsters have no idea what's happening. And I think, there were definitely polls at the time that were like, oh, Hillary could lose this. But it still felt like, kind of like this year where it's like, well, of course Hillary's going to win. But now it's like, oh, the sheer number of people voting for Trump, it's like, after all the things he's done and just all the things he said, and just from like a character standpoint, it's shocking. And it makes me think like, I think it's crazy to be like, this person can't be president because they're a woman. But I think that's like a very real discussion for a lot of our country, I mean, it makes sense because at the same time, we have a guy who is, in the office and getting close to 50% of the vote, who is, I would argue, openly racist. And so if that can happen, then of course sexism can exist and can happen. If racism in the police force is, I think, does exist, and I think there's a lot of evidence to support that claim, then yes, something like sexism also can exist in that same world. And I think that there is this denialism. There's a denialism on both sides. There's a denialism from the left that it matters to people that someone is racist or sexist or puts people in cages at the border or does horrific things. And there is a denialism on the right that these things even exist. And I think those go into tandem because if you can't convince someone that something is bad if they believe it doesn't exist. Yeah, I think you're right that the moral argument doesn't actually hold any real. It's not converting anybody because people believe what they want to believe on the moral argument. There are like religious people out there who think Trump is like blessed by God and like a good Christian, like servant of Jesus. And it's like, what about this man and his lifestyle indicates that he has any Christian faith whatsoever? Like you really, there are people out there who are dumb enough to think that this man holds up a Bible or like says that he is the second most popular man ever after Jesus Christ, that he is like a religious figure, and that he should be, that he embodies like your good Christian values. I mean, it's crazy. It's just not. I mean, I saw this. I've deleted. I've talked about it on the show before. I deleted the Facebook app, deleted the Twitter app from my phone. It's too toxic. It's all just negative and people arguing, and I feel like lighter and better off for not having that in my life. But amid the election, I'm like, I know we're going to do this pod. I'm like, time to dive back in and see what people are talking about. And I saw maybe the most infuriating of all just the dumb arguments people were having on Twitter was just some girl in Florida talking about like a Republican who voted for Trump, just been talking about how great Trump is the whole time, made some post about like, man, guys, win or lose, treat everyone with respect and like have character and like be kind to one another. And it's like, you are so full of shit right now. You don't believe that stuff. You can't talk about like treating other people with respect and kindness and then vote for a man who does none of those things. You can't value character and vote for someone who has none. But that is just a cognitive dissonance that like a ton of people in this country have. Like almost half the country feels that way. We're finding out.
I think also, no disrespect to this woman. And I don't know if this is how she believes.
She's a fucking idiot.
All right, fine. You can but I think personally, that there are people out there that say that stuff and they mean, let's be kind to each other. Let's be kind to the people that look like us.
Yeah, no, I agree.
It's not about people of color. It's not about being kind to immigrants who are crossing the border, who are fleeing murder, literally being killed in their home country. And I think the problem is like that mentality is on both sides. There are people in the Democratic Party and in the Republican Party that are just like, we all just need to be nice to each other. We all just need to be nice to each other. But it's like, that can't exist if you are not acknowledging that people's lives are on the line here.
Yeah.
I think what this election has taught me the most, and we'll talk about the Senate in a little bit, but like, the Democrats are wrong. Their strategy is wrong. It's incorrect. They may have eked out this election, but if you're eking out an election against a guy like Donald Trump, then you are going to lose for 40 years, because next in 2024, they're going to run Mitt Romney, and Mitt Romney is going to sweep the fucking stage with everybody, because he's going to come in and be like, Black Lives Matter. And also, I'm a Republican. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, he's really nice. He's not like Trump. He's not like this. And he's not going to raise my taxes. And he's going to win 80% of the vote.
Yeah.
The Democrats need to wake up and realize that they're losing. They're losing constantly. This is an embarrassing showing. This is pathetic, honestly. And here's a few things that I took away. All of the women in the squad, those 4 women, all won their House seats back. They're not all in, like, I mean, they're in like pretty blue districts in their states, but they're not in blue states all the time. I want to say, I mean, because Wisconsin, Rashida Tlaib was in Wisconsin. Wisconsin was close. It's still blue, but it's close, you know, and she's vocally anti-Trump and like vocally pushes back. And I think what Democrats want, they want someone to stand up and fight for them. They don't want this wishy-washy, we all need to get along bullshit, because I don't want to fucking get along with racists. I have no interest in getting along with somebody who like pepper sprays protesters. I have no interest in it. And I want someone to stand up there and say, I'm done with this bullshit, because I'm not here. I'm not here to make friends.
We want what Trump supporters get with Trump.
Yes, exactly.
Is like, okay, he's a fucking Indian. He's lying all the time, but at least he's I can't even say he's a straight shooter with like a straight face. But like, I mean, that's why there are all these. That's why I don't know. I guess I don't know if Bernie's the guy to win this election necessarily. But
imagine this. Like just real quick.
Sure.
Imagine we had on the left a person who we were pushing through, we were blocking every abortion ban, we were blocking judges, we were keeping gay rights and everything in line, we were getting stuff done on the Green New Deal, we were like, you know, helping people with poverty, we were fixing a lot of this stuff. But he goes out there and he says horrifically like bigoted and just tremendously problematic stuff on television all the time, and lies, even if he's lying for us, for our side. I guarantee you he would fly. It would be fine. No, they would be fine with it, because he's getting stuff done. And that's what Trump is doing. But the problem is it's
you think it'd be okay? You think it'd be fine?
I think that it would be more fine than I am comfortable with.
Maybe. I think a huge liberal problem now is just like the oversensitive stuff for like the cancel culture stuff of like, oh, you aren't canceling things correctly, you know, like, oh, you aren't protesting the right way, I think is a huge like problem on like the extreme left, like Brooklyn stuff, where it's just like, I don't know, like in insisting on abolishing the police when like realistically we should be fighting for like police reform, I think is like an example. Actually. And if I'm saying I think we need to reform the police, there are people here who say like you're a bad person for saying police should be like trained more, you know? I think that is like the left shooting themselves in the foot and making fools of themselves and getting guys like Trump elected.
I actually want to point to this. There's a Twitter thread that was there was a Democratic caucus call, and this woman Spamberger, who barely won re-election, I believe she was an incumbent. She won re-election in Virginia. And it says, Spamberger on Democratic caucus call. We lost races we shouldn't have lost. Defund police almost cost me my race because of an attack ad. Don't say socialism ever again. Need to get back to the basics. And it's in quotes, is yelling. She's yelling this. If we run this race again, we will get fucking torn apart in 2022, Spamberger says. Pelosi comes back on, says she disagrees. They won the House and the presidency. So far, we've lost 5 seats in the House, and the presidency is close. We have a mandate, Pelosi says, before getting off the call. Also earlier in the call, Debbie Murcaskell-Powell, who lost her race, was crying and mentioned how people can't pronounce her name and said to stop being negative on Twitter. Jeffries comes back to tell people to stop leaking that reporters aren't your friends. Jaya Paul is telling Jeffries to find the leakers. It just keeps going. They're saying Pelosi is doing an amazing job. Where's Schumer? He's not doing anything. Rashida Tlaib says we're making painful statements. We need to wait till the numbers come down. Basically, like, the Republicans are panicking. I mean, the Democrats are panicking because we lost a bunch of seats that we were supposed to win. And this is really close.
So what do you think that is? We were talking about the Senate. Like, why specifically are they losing these elections?
Well, number one, the Senate and House specifically are different elections than the national races. And the problem is with that is that because these smaller elections become national, these these representatives are beholden to a national narrative about defund the police, about socialism, about Medicare for all, even though if they don't actually support it themselves. But we're forced to answer these questions about defund the police, and they're just sometimes just called out for just saying they support it. And the nationalization of these smaller states or these smaller races seems to be a negative for Democrats because they can't come off as more conservative in their places where they need conservatives to win.
So, like, hypothetically, we're talking, I don't know, Georgia. I actually have no actual knowledge of this, so I'm just pulling examples out of the air. We have a red state like Georgia, and we're talking about somebody trying to win like a Senate seat in Georgia.
So that's happening right now.
And if they're a Democrat, you're appealing to not necessarily Black Lives Matter, you're saying, but you're appealing to somebody who is just leans left as opposed to like far left. And when the conversation becomes all about like Black Lives Matter, abolishing the police, etc., it forces like local people in red states to lean farther left than like they know their base would even go for.
Yeah, I think there's also there's two different things because you mentioned Black Lives Matter and defund the police. And I think those are actually two separate things.
I was just trying to think of like the most polarizing national issues. I was just trying to throw that out as like,
I think defund the police is one of the most polarizing issues.
Yeah.
That's going to come out. That's sort of a narrative issue. I mean, I think the economy and COVID are actually major issues, but as a narrative of policy going forward is defund the police freaks people out.
Yeah.
You know? And it also is, I think, a very problematic phrase. I think that, I understand what it means, where they're coming from, the idea, which is like, we need to like move money into more supportive systems, blah, 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 blah. But
I've also seen people say defund the police means abolish the police. And right. I'm like, no one agrees on what these things even mean,
I do agree. I do agree. That Black Lives Matter. And I think Black Lives Matter is something every Democrat should be saying all the time, everywhere, because I don't give a shit. That is the truth. That is the truth. And everyone who can't say that should be embarrassed because it is a simple fact. It is a simple fact that African Americans in the United States are being killed by police at higher rates than white people. And they've been doing so consistently and in horrific ways, and it needs to be dealt with. And I don't think there's any backlash. And I don't think if anyone says,
see, you say there's no backlash, but even now, I mean, and I agree with you. We're on the same page. Black lives obviously matter, and that they're disproportionately negatively impacted by all of the things that straight white men specifically take for granted. But I think there are I think there's a ton of people out there who hear Black Lives Matter and think, but my life matters too. And like, well, all lives matter is a compelling statement to a shit ton of people. Now we're talking about like almost half the country are like hearing Black Lives Matter and think like, what about my life matters too? you know, and then it's like, okay, yeah, actually, that's not what that's about. What we're saying is that, and now we're talking about an explanation of semantics, you know, and somehow it's all muddled. And I don't really know exactly why that's happening, because I agree with you. I hear Black Lives Matter. I'm just like, yes, they do. Why can't we just take a moment and recognize that their struggle is different than ours? But I think the conversation just gets so muddied up now. And I think that's like it's somehow become a polarizing thing. I don't think because of necessarily racism, as opposed to just like confusion on like what everything stands for, like what everybody's trying to say.
Yes. And I think that, you know, if the Democrats want to win, or if we want to win anything, we have to figure that out. You have to figure out how the message of Black Lives Matter doesn't come off as problematic to anyone, because it's ridiculous. If someone says all lives matter, yes, if all lives matter, then Black Lives Matter, correct? That, like, you know, the mathematics of that, you know, all lives matter includes Black Lives Matter. So that means you can say Black Lives Matter, you know. I think
sure, but that even is like a simple conversation that like you've learned to have, that I've learned to have, that like liberals have learned to have. Right. But if that conversation's not being had, people are I just feel like instinctively people are like disagreeing with that in a way. Right. I don't know exactly what I'm getting at, but I think there's just a ton of people in this country who hear Black Lives Matter, and until you have that conversation with them specifically, they just think it's like some like liberal propaganda or something like
which
that.
Which is why Biden needs to say it. Which is why, like in his, you know, knock on wood, we have a Biden presidency. In his acceptance speech, he needs to say Black Lives Matter. And
explain what it means.
The narrative has to come from the top, and it has to spread to everyone so that it becomes so popular that it doesn't make sense to move against it. Now, that aside, I think the important part of that is I think that is an issue that there is no, like, ultimately,
it's a morality. It's a right or wrong.
It's a right or wrong.
And there's a clear good side. There's a clear evil side. It's just somehow the messaging is fucked up. And I think you're right. The only way you say it is by getting the people at the top to keep saying it and keep explaining it. I mean, it's the kind of thing like, you know, to make, I guess, the kind of a parallel comparison is like, people think Trump's a racist. Like, I think a lot of people do. We're finding out it doesn't really matter in this election. But like, I think he's racist. You think he's racist. Like, if somebody thought I was racist, I would be using every opportunity to be like, I'm not a racist. I hate white supremacy. Like, and he acts like it's a huge chore to say that he doesn't believe in this stuff. But it's the same kind of thing. Like, if you're concerned about that messaging, like, I would be saying it all the time. And they should probably, I guess maybe this isn't the best way to compare things to compare. But it's like, oh, these are important things. If people have the wrong idea about something that's important, which is on one end that you endorse white supremacists, which hopefully he doesn't. And if he doesn't, I'd be saying it all the time. And the other one is like Black Lives Matter, and and we should be trying to fix these things that negatively impact them. And we should be saying it as much as possible.
And if you can't win that messaging, then you need to figure out a new message, because that is a simple message. The simple message of anti-racism is like, it's a no-brainer. Like, if you can't win on I don't agree with racism, then what the fuck are we doing? Yeah. Like, you know, like where do we even begin? You can't begin to talk about defund the police if you can't convince people that racism is bad. And so that's one thing. The defund the police thing, I think, is much more complicated, because the defund the police thing isn't a moral issue. It is morally repugnant for police to kill Black people on the street, innocent Black men on the street. It is not a moral issue to talk about pulling monetary funds away from every police department in America because of what's happening. And that's when it gets muddy. And that's when people say, okay, I agree with this part, but I don't agree with the other part. And so that's an issue you're going to have to navigate. Also, why does it matter? We shouldn't be talking about it because the president can't do shit about it. That's stuff that has to be, that's the conversations that have to be had in local communities. The president can't defund the police. So why are we even asking him? And also on the left, we saw this in Wisconsin when like the Wisconsin in Minnesota. No, it was in I think where George Floyd was killed. That was in Minnesota. The city council went up and they all said like, we're going to defund the police. And they were all interviewed afterward. And they were like, and they said, well, no, we're not really going to do that. We wanted to stand in support. Then don't fucking say it. Like, you don't have to, like, if you don't have the balls to go out there and take the heat that you're going to get for not saying that, but you're going to say it and you're going to go on record and say that, oh no, I didn't actually mean it. That's why people hate Democrats.
That's liberal bullshit right there.
That's bullshit. That is bullshit to its core. That's why people like Bernie Sanders, because Bernie Sanders does what he says and he doesn't give a shit if people don't like it.
It's been on the same message for 40 years, you know?
Right. And it's like, he doesn't give a shit if you don't disagree with him. He believes what he believes, and it's okay if you disagree with me. And it's okay if, you know, there's vitriol that comes with that. But we got to stand up for something. We got to stand up for what we believe in, or else we're going to just get clobbered by the other side who just lies about everything. And if they can convince you that the liberals are, you know, muddying everything, when they're behind closed doors making these sort of like, we need to tone down the socialism rhetoric. We need to like I don't know. I just get really frustrated. I get frustrated that we have a clear message of we need to help people, not hurt people, give people health care. We need to have people stop dying in the streets. We need to get the COVID under control. And the messaging isn't landing. I think COVID did, and I think that's probably why Joe Biden's going to win. But
it's also crazy that it's this close in a year where now, what is it, 200,000 plus Americans have died from a virus that, I don't know. I mean, everyone's saying the United States mishandled. A lot of that could be put on Trump's feet. But it's still not enough to keep almost like the third highest polls, voting turnout for him.
Say what you will about the polls. The polls were steady since March. It didn't matter. It didn't do anything. It didn't convince people otherwise. And that's really disheartening.
I want to know what people care about. And I think, you know, I know from like my experience and like the Republicans in my life, like what matters to them, but I really just don't understand what happens to like people in the middle of the country. Like, what do they like? What are they voting
matters
for?
To the people that you know?
I mean, we've talked about it, I think, on the thing before, which is like, I mean, in my hometown, there's a lot of military contractors. So it's like Republicans, military funding, it goes hand in hand. There's just like a lot of conservatives that way. Yeah. Or I mean, New York, I mean, there's people who just don't want to pay taxes, you know, and like that's a big draw for them. And if you're upper class, I mean, people always say that like you're a Democrat until you get money. And then it's like, I don't want to pay taxes. And it's like, OK, cool. So then that's the most important thing that you're voting for, you know. But if you are a poor or like lower middle class person in the Midwest who would benefit directly from, I guess, you know, a raised minimum wage or I don't know, all these like programs that we're talking about, getting everybody health insurance, like trying to build communities, like maybe they just feel like that conversation isn't happening for them. Right. Like when people are talking about like defunding the police and like spending that money, you know, more. I mean, I shouldn't be saying defunding the police, but like if you're listening to Democrats talking about building programs and building up cities, they're not talking about building up the middle of the country or I don't know.
Yes, I think that's possible. I think it's possible that the messaging that they're hearing is like they're not talking about me. They're talking about poor people in the cities. I think that some people, unfortunately, think that money goes to people of color and not to poor white people, which I think is wrong. But I think there's probably messaging that they're hearing to the contrary.
Yeah,
I think one of the biggest, most interesting things from this election is that Biden did worse with the Latin American community than Hillary did. Yeah. And I think that there's a lot of evidence that the Latin American community, the Democrats got the Latin American community totally wrong. I was watching a interview with Rosie Perez, and it was like Nicole Wallace was interviewing her, and I guess they're very close friends. She was asking her, she was like, "What are you hearing about the Latin American community? What do they want? What is it that like they are going out to vote for?" And she said, "It's the economy and COVID, just like everybody else, just like every other person." But the implication I think was. And Nicole Wallace asked later, like, what do people think about immigration and like children at the border and things like that? And she was like, that doesn't move people in the same way that the economy does, because American citizens who are of the Latin American community are not going to the polls necessarily for immigration reform. They're going for the economy, and the messaging on the economy is breaking through from the Trump side. And Biden lost a ton of ground with Latinx voters this year around. And I think that a lot of liberals look at that and they their heads spin because they're like, what do you mean? How could this be? What about the immigration stuff? But it's like, we have to realize that, immigration doesn't necessarily, just because there are people who are potentially of the same place, look the same, doesn't mean they think the same. And doesn't mean that.
And it doesn't affect them now.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's like, what have you done for me lately? Cool.
Maybe their whole family is already here and they don't have family that back home. Maybe they do. And their family back home is not trying to, they're trying to immigrate legally or whatever. It's not a moving issue for them.
There's also a ton of, I didn't have that. So why would I give that to other people?
Right. Yeah.
Which is kind of disgusting, but I see that all over social media, especially with some other issues I thought we could bring up later too was, but there's a lot of
you see it with student loan debt.
Okay. So then the one that I saw too was, Florida specifically raised the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And that was something that I saw a lot of people. Yeah. I guess that just got voted on. So it's going to happen, but it's happening slowly over the next 4, 5, 6 years.
Okay.
Which, so I've also seen people argue by the time it's $15, it should really be 16,
yeah.
So people are talking about this, and I just saw a ton of people who were just outraged about this on social media. And I kind of get it, but I also don't. But it's a lot of people who are outraged that aren't working minimum wage jobs, and they're like, oh, this is going to negatively impact small business owners. And they're not small business owners. So I'm like, so what do you guys talk? You guys, none of you will be directly impacted by this. But there just seems to be this attitude of well, when I was growing up and I had a job, I wasn't making $15 an hour. So why should I be voting to give these other people $15 an hour?
Punks.
Yeah, these teenagers don't need it. And it's but these teenagers are also trying to pay their own way through college, There's also older people who there isn't a job out there, so they're flipping burgers, trying to make ends meet until something else clicks for them. Somebody can work 40 hours a week and not make enough to survive. That should be bothering people, and it doesn't. It just seems insanely selfish to me. And I get that, if you're a specific type of small business and you're hiring, also, I don't know what kind of a small business you're running where you aren't paying people more than $15 an hour already. How many small businesses are hiring minimum wage employees? I don't know. But half the people in Florida are employed by corporations, Amazon, Walmart, etc. And these are all companies that can afford to give people raises.
And guess who's paying for the messaging that says this hurts small businesses?
Yeah.
It's big corporations, because they're the ones whose bottom line is actually going to be affected, not small businesses. Small businesses don't have super PACs. They don't have the idea that small businesses all get together and they're like, we got to stop this. That doesn't fucking exist. I don't see any evidence of that anywhere. Also, the idea that the $15 minimum wage affects small businesses in the way that people talk about it, there isn't a ton of evidence of that either. So it's clear that this is dark money coming in from, big corporations that stand to lose a ton of revenue. So they feed money into Republican think tanks or whatever and get the messaging out that $15 minimum wage hurts people. Also, the other side of that is people similar in the idea that people who are like, why should I vote for this? I didn't make $15 an hour. People that are making more than $15 an hour and are still struggling are like, you're not helping me.
Right.
Why should I help this other person? I've made it. I've figured out how to get out of the minimum wage world, but I'm still struggling. I still need help. So I don't have any money to help these other people. And I think that's on a lot of people's minds is that that a lot of people in this country, especially with COVID, are struggling financially. And we're seeing, and I think a lot of these red states, especially, are getting hit really, really hard economically. And they're not seeing a plan from either side. And the messaging of it is probably that the Democrats are the reason why it's not getting done. Because they proposed something that was too big. But I don't see Republicans running on the deficit in 2020, because if they did, it just wouldn't work. It wouldn't work. People want help.
And the Democratic stuff, you really have to use your imagination a little bit in order to see the effects of that, right? Is like, why did all of a sudden a burger flipper, which I hate that term too, but I saw tons of that. Oh my God. All of a sudden, one of these disgusting slobs,
right?
One of these like shitty homeless people that prepares my food for me when I pick up my Big Mac, that fucking hobo, that Sasquatch in there with his bindle coming off the road after rolling around in dirt and then putting his paws on my food. He's going to make $15 an hour. I worked my ass off to get 18, and it's like, so all of a sudden I'm going to get making more money. And it's like, over time you would, because their companies need a way to reward people who have a higher skill set. And at a certain point, we stopped raising the minimum wage. We started lowering it. And that's when all the shit got fucked. Also, and our middle class started falling apart. Is like, we have to have a floor so that people can keep like getting paid more to compensate for that.
Right. And also, where's the messaging that $15 minimum wage puts more money in people's pockets? And there's tons of evidence that these people who make the lowest amount of money, they spend all of their money.
Because they need fucking money.
Exactly. They spend everything. They go to small businesses. If they have $15 minimum wages, they can afford to maybe not go to Walmart for everything. They can go shop at your small business.
They're not duct taping stacks of like cash to their stripper wives and like having their Swedish family like smuggle into another country, Wolf of Wall Street style. This is babysitting in a bank account to save up for a rainy day or maybe like a car payment. Like, what the fuck are we talking about?
Right. And I think that is what Trump spoke to in 2016. In 2016, Trump spoke to the fact that corporations and big money was ruining politics, and it was ruining the country, and people were losing their jobs because of it. And people really resonated with that message. And that works because people do believe that, because it's fucking true. Yeah. He's not wrong. And the thing this time around, he didn't do any of that because he's a corporate shrill just like the rest of them. But that is a message that works. Why doesn't the Democratic establishment look at what worked in 2016 for Donald Trump and take it, minus the racism, minus the xenophobia, minus the sexism, and just take the stuff that works, that is palatable for people? And what is it? Corporations are the problem. Corporations are running this country. Big money runs this country. Democrats and Republicans are taking in a bunch of money, and they're corrupt, and they're not doing anything to support your best interest. They're doing it to line their own fucking pockets. And if you could have a Democrat, like a Democratic coalition that says that constantly, you're going to win elections.
Yeah.
Because that's what people want to hear. People don't give a shit about, unfortunately, it's really, truly unfortunate, but people do not care about people dying in the streets. People of color dying in the streets. They don't care about people across the border losing their lives and kids. Liberals care about it. I do think some Republicans care about it, but they're not voting for it. They're not voting because of it. The bigger issues are the economy.
People vote for the issues that are immediately affecting them.
Right. Immediately affecting them. People vote for their own self-interest.
The hierarchy of needs.
Yes.
Illegal immigration is like at the top of the pyramid,
right?
You know, like it doesn't necessarily affect people, and I mean, it doesn't affect me.
There are also Democrats who don't necessarily agree with an easier way to enter the country, and we don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
You know, it's definitely something we should be talking about because it's a very, very complicated issue. I do think Elizabeth Warren was the only one who really spoke to the idea of like, hey, maybe we should be talking about fixing up, like helping these countries that are falling apart because they're being run by drug cartels. Why don't we talk about helping them out so we can rebuild infrastructure down there and people will want to stay, but also maybe return and like be with their families. I don't think people want to leave their homes and come to America because they're fleeing murder. Like I think they would, if they could, and they had a situation, they would stay. But, you know, obviously America, we should be proud that people want to come to this country. Yeah. You know, even with all this division, people still want to come here. Even with like, you know, a lot of people be saying like, oh, I can't wait to move to Canada and everything. There are people that are risking their lives and the lives of their children just to get into this country. And like, think of how like offensive that is to them. For you like, oh, I wish I could just move to Canada and I not have to deal with this. Like the privilege that like comes with that.
Right.
You know, like we have to be realistic, you know? I don't think Democrats are.
I think that appeals to a certain type of Democrat, that people care about these like bigger picture things. Like we all want like real change. I think like the people on the left that I know, and that like the youth, you always see these like voting maps of like people under 30 voted. It would have been a landslide. It would have been a blue landslide. And ultimately it feels like this is not a blue wave. This is a blue. Maybe it is a blue wave in the sense that it like washes upon the shore and then retreats back into the ocean, ultimately not changing anything. Like the next election is just as scary.
Slowly eroding over, maybe until it's too late.
Maybe, yeah. Maybe we're just slowly gaining ground, but also it doesn't seem like we really are slowly gaining ground all the time. You know, it seems like there are more and more Democrats as far as like the popular vote's concerned. But as far as the way it's set up, that's the other thing, I guess, that had me thinking about like what people in the Midwest care about is I just see a lot of electoral college talk. And people are like, let's get rid of the electoral college. Anytime there's something like this and we're all just waiting to see what happens in like Maine, people are like, let's get rid of the electoral college. This is dumb. Biden's going to win by like millions of votes. Like, why doesn't that matter? And the only people I see really arguing about this are people who are not in any of these states. You know, like the argument is like, oh, so these middle states have representation. And this is all coming from people who live on the coasts. So I don't actually know what like people in the Midwest care about. And I'd be really curious to see like what are the issues that they need specific representation on, as opposed to just what the majority of the people in the country vote on. Do you know what I'm saying? Like the difference is like, well, the majority of the people in our country are for this. But what specific issues are affecting South Dakota that aren't affecting the rest of the country? You know, like what is it about Montana or whatever that it has a specific scenario that just people in the cities couldn't possibly comprehend?
It is interesting. And I think there are differences, but there are actually a lot more similarities than I think we realize. I think one thing we can point to from this election, which I think was very surprising. Well, not very surprising, but like I think surprising in that it cut through a number of different states. They legalized marijuana in 4 states.
Yeah,
fully recreational marijuana,
we've been seeing that forever.
They legalized it in New Jersey, in Oregon. In Oregon, they legalized small amounts of heroin and cocaine.
Oregon, yeah,
and mushrooms.
Every substance. They said
every substance, yes.
I don't know if they completely legalized it, but it was like
decriminalized.
Possession is $100 fine and potentially like rehabilitation as opposed to like hard jail time.
Right.
Which is something that the popular vote in our country is like all about. I don't know about every drug, but weed legalization is something that because
it also won in South Dakota,
and
Arizona, and by significant margins. It was 2-3 in everywhere except South Dakota. And South Dakota was a little bit closer. It was more like 56-44.
So you're saying everybody's potheads. That's how we appeal to everybody. We put on half baked and then get everybody.
Everybody wants the right to do what they want with their bodies.
Yes.
And specifically with drugs like marijuana there is no evidence. There's not a shred of evidence that says it is, extremely dangerous.
Or could kill you, or could kill other people.
You could talk about smoking kills you. But now we have edibles, so you don't even need to. And also, this is all stuff for people over 21. Once you're over 21, you get the right to do with it what you want. We're not telling kids to do it, But it's fascinating that these provisions pass in red and blue states. Now, are the Democrats going out and saying we need to legalize marijuana? No, they're tentative about saying it because they're worried about it. But it's a winning issue,
Yeah,
it's a winning issue. These are things that people want, and yet they don't have the balls to say it because they are also beholden to the Electoral College, and they're worried about losing seats in the Senate and the House that are like hinging on people in battleground states. But I think at some point we're always gonna have that. The people who give you the minor majority or the minor minority are always going to be on the fringe. It's always going to be flippy, like people that are close. So why not just go with what people like. Just say things that are popular. And people will be on board. You got to stay away from things that aren't popular. And you know what isn't popular? Defund the police. It's not popular yet. You know, the idea, you have to figure out the messaging before you can talk about it. And I think like the far left and some people on Twitter too, you know, we all want these things. We all want these things to be true. We all want these things to be popular. They just, they aren't yet. And if they aren't yet, don't take that as it's never going to happen. And don't take that as you're wrong. Take that as we got to figure out how to message it. You got to figure out how to convince people.
I feel like Democrats have lashed onto the term like reform the police, which I think makes more sense. But I mean, it doesn't sound nearly as catchy if you're shouting it in the streets. But
I've been thinking about
definitely what people say.
Why not end police violence, like end police murder, like be specific. Like we don't want to end cops. We want to stop cops from like killing black people.
Get rid of crooked cops. Crooked cops.
Really, the messaging is there, Tim.
Crooked crops.
We're getting rid of crooked crops.
Tired of this corn growing at an angle.
Tim, we lost Nebraska.
Goddamn it, get your corn in a row.
If your corn's on a row, you're coming for you.
I'm checking on farm checks tonight, boys. All right, be out in your fields, waiting my check.
I mean, I
got my slide rule ready.
Why can't we all get behind like dump corrupt cops? Like I don't know. I'm not a messaging person. Like figure out how to say that. Figure out how to say it. Figure out how to say it so it's popular. Because watching people die in the streets is not popular. So it should be easy, you know. And I know I'm saying this as just a dude who watches the news and sees stuff, and like I have no power, and I know it's more complicated than that.
And I'm agreeing with you, but I'm still here sitting like I don't know what people in the middle of the country think. I'm like really curious what some of these. My rage has been replaced with like just curiosity of like what motivated you to vote for Trump? Because I mean now after our conversation, it's like. Yeah, everybody votes for different reasons. Everybody votes for different things. Like everyone has different priorities, and just focusing on morality isn't good enough. You know, you also have to like show some fucking numbers, you know,
and show some balls. Like
show some balls.
I think that's actually another thing I want to talk about is the right respects like
straight talk,
like cojones, like yeah. Come through, and if they disagree with you, disagree with you. But if you say it with a straight face and you believe in what you say, that's okay. And I think that I have more respect for people that, you know, they come out and say like horribly racist things because at least they're open about it. At least they're like saying it to your face because you know that there are millions of people out there that don't say anything racist until the door is closed.
Yeah.
You know? Until the door's closed and they know no one's listening. Those are the people that are the problem. Obviously, and I don't mean to say that the people that are outright racists are not a problem, but it's the sleeper. It's the sleeper racists who are doing deals in back rooms because you know what? They're smarter than just the blunt racists. Right. They're hiding their racism because
they're embedding and they're hiding it in laws and like real things that affect real change. You know?
Yes. And like, also, I think that's why the polls are wrong because how many people want to get on the phone and say, "Yeah, I'm voting for the guy who puts kids in cages," you know, ostensibly. Like that's what the thing
saying. Is the Democratic
Do you think
message.
People actually are going to say that on the phone. Also, who's answering the fucking phone? What are we doing?
I've never seen anybody take a poll ever. I've never responded to a text. Those people are crazy. And I think you're right. Is like Democrats have only made it embarrassing to say that you are voting for Trump.
Right.
But at the end of the day, like people have their reasons and. You know, and I don't think anything that the Democrats said was compelling enough for even Republicans to flip. Even if we just take Trump out of it, which I think is a lot of the election is like it's Republicans versus Democrats. I don't know how many people are actually flip flopping every election, you know, like it's Republicans versus Democrats and the Democrats didn't do a good enough job of convincing Republicans to flip.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Both parties convinced more people than ever before to come out. Yeah, I don't know. Ultimately, it seems like it's an L. It seems like an L for the Democrats. And I hope they can get their shit together.
Well, and I hope they I think, you know, and you see this on Twitter and you see like what people say. But I think that the right has respect for someone like AOC. You know, they have respect for her because they attack her all the time. She is in a woman in the House of Representatives from Queens.
With really no power
None.
whatsoever.
So little.
She's just like a hot person with good ideas, and that scares the shit out of like
Which is why they attack her, because they know that when she comes to play, they know that she comes and she says, I know what I believe in and here's what I stand for. And I'm not here to bow to Nancy Pelosi, and I'm not here to do what everybody says. I'm here to do what I believe in. And Republicans respect that. They're like, damn, this girl's got balls. And like, I don't know, I hate her because I disagree with her, but she's a big problem. I mean, we don't look at like, I am much more scared of Mitch McConnell than I am of
Mitt Romney.
fucking Mitt Romney. Yeah. Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham both
are like scary monster turtles.
They also just
live underground, and
Mitch McConnell won a 7th term.
Yeah.
And destroyed his opponent. So did Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham also won another, I don't know, he's been in there forever too, against a campaign that was one of the highest funded campaigns in history. Now, A, I don't know why we're wasting money in these places, but B, it's like, what are we doing? Why are we trying to compete in these races if we know we're going to, like, I think there's going to be a lot of...
How bad do you have to be that Mitch McConnell seems like the right person to vote for?
But here's the thing. I think when they look at Mitch McConnell, they look at a guy who does everything he can.
He fucking hustles
to get right-wing things through.
Yeah, he's the Marcus Smart of the Republican Party. He's just like diving on the ball, he's just diving on the ground, going after loose balls,
right?
Like fucking throwing Supreme Justices back into bounds before the election's over, you know.
And he's like, I'm the evil one. I know it. You know, he doesn't like pretend that there's no pretending that there's no placating to the left and saying, oh, we need to work together. He says, no, we don't need to work together. Openly, he says this.
We need liberal motherfuckers to get out there and do the shit. Right. But maybe part of it, too, is like the Democrats still are like, it's a bunch of old bags, man. And the Republican platform is super easy. Destroy everything. Like, that's the Republican Party is like, we don't want any government. We're trying to destroy all this stuff. We're giving tax breaks enough to the middle class so they see like 20 extra bucks on their paycheck. Thank you so much, Trump, for that extra $20. Thank you for the Netflix subscription. That's going to be enough to sustain me through the year. Yeah. And then so they can give tax breaks to like huge corporations. And that's it. That's their whole end game. They don't care about healthcare. They don't care about any of these things. And Democrats are like trying to build these programs, but it's such slow, moderate bullshit in the middle that like when AOC speaks or when Bernie speaks, it's like, oh my God, yes, you are talking about like the ultimate vision for this. You guys are talking about the extreme goal. One side has people saying we're going to destroy everything. And then we need people on the left who are like, we're going to build everything. We're going to legalize weed. We're going to get everybody health care. Don't worry about it. We're going to give
everybody $1,000 every month. Universal basic income. Like after this COVID thing, we have to seriously talk about that, because I think if Democrats, seriously in 2024, we have a presidential candidate in Kamala Harris or whoever rose up who says, I want to give everybody $1,000 every month and we're going to pass it. I have the votes. I have the votes in the House and the Senate to do it. And my opponent doesn't want to do that. You got to think people in the Midwest are going, I don't think we vote for $1,000 a month, man. I think we go for it. Like,
what's going to help you more, a small tax break or $1,000 cold hard cash in your bank account?
And it's not like $15 minimum wage where like somebody like your boss has to pay for it. It says no, the federal government is going to build in tax cuts, tax incentive, like tax structure for Amazon, where basically Amazon is going to pay everybody $1,000 a month. Because, then that's all going to be funneled back to Amazon anyways. But that's, it's like, but they're too scared. They're too scared to do it because they're worried about they're worried about the Republicans going out and saying like, this is a welfare state and everything. But the thing is, the Republicans aren't going to say anything they want anyways. So why not just do what you believe in and fuck the haters,
I know, but they're not going to. What's going to happen is like, they're going to win this. Biden's going to win. We're going to lose the Senate. Nothing's going to change really for 4 years.
Yep. And then people are going to
they're going to run it back. And Kamala Harris is going to run and people are going to vote for her.
Because people are going to be mad.
People are vote for Mitt Romney. And that's it. And that's what's going to happen. And it sucks. but it's like, cool. Democrats aren't changing shit. You know, they're just like, there's no progress was made. I found this so depressing. It was such a depressing week. I was like, cool. The blue wave, it's all happening. And
there is an upside, Tim. In 2022, there are a lot of Republican seats up for grabs. So it is possible that we can win back the Senate in 2022.
That'd be cool. Then maybe some real shit can happen.
Yes. So we got to wait. But that's the other thing, too. Is like, I'm not giving up. I still believe in what I believe in. And I think the future of the party looks really bright. Yeah. Because I'm seeing the voter turnout means that people are more engaged in general. And it means, and I hopefully, come as soon as Biden gives a victory speech, knock on wood. Yeah. We get to go back to ripping him apart, because I think that's what everyone on the left has been like holding back their criticisms as much. And I sort of like my mother and my parents were asking me, like, my mom was like, do you really like Biden? And I was like, he's not my first pick. But we're going to talk to him later. This isn't about what I want from him.
Right. Do you really like Trump? That's the weird thing too, is it seems like on the right where people are just like, that's all the online shit is kind of like, oh yeah, well, Trump's like the best. Trump's awesome. It's like, well, Biden does corrupt shit too. And it's like, yeah, man. And he needs to fix that, like I don't know anybody on the left who's like pro corruption, like, I don't think anybody says it's cool. Whereas it seems like people on the right, like, look at that as a way to like support Trump. Trump's great because he's edgy and he's talking all this shit and he whatever is cheating on his wives and stuff like that. And this is like awesome, cool behavior. But whatever. I'm just rambling about morality again, which nobody fucking cares about.
Right. Exactly. Nobody cares about the morality. Nobody cares about the hypocrisy. Nobody really gives a shit about open corruption in the Republican Party as long as there is open corruption in the Democratic Party. Yeah. So if that's all true, then fucking ignore it. Ignore everything. Let the courts and let committees deal with that stuff. When it comes to the national stage, talk about building stuff. Talk. And I think the Biden campaign, I think they did run a really good campaign towards the end. They were pretty focused. They stayed out of Joe Biden, I think, which is, something I probably couldn't have done. He never spoke about Trump's children, even though Trump talked incessantly about his children. Yeah. Because I think the thing is like that wouldn't have moved people. He knew that.
See, I know we keep saying this like doesn't move people. I think it affects. I think that's the base, though. I think like the Democratic base like wants that. I think there are people who just want like a civil guy in there, but I don't think it's changing minds. It's definitely not going to change minds that Biden was like classy and didn't bring Trump's family into it. That's not going to get anyone on any Republican to be like, oh yeah, I need like a good human being, because like that's not what you're voting for. You're voting for two probably not great human beings. One's just like blatantly worse. And maybe, talking about the destruction of our democracy. And the other, took money from China or whatever the fuck it was, and like made a bunch of money after he was vice president. And we don't know where all that came from. And, he's rich and talking about like destroying the whatever upper class. I mean, I don't know. I'm just throwing out all this shit that I was like hearing online. And it's like, cool. So maybe this isn't the best person in the world. But I don't know. And
also some of the stuff you mentioned, Tim, is not substantiated. But also, I would say that doesn't really matter. It doesn't, like, they throw stuff, they say all sorts of stuff, they source it in weird, dark parts of the internet, and it doesn't matter if it's true or not. So if it doesn't matter, like if what is said about someone doesn't matter, then we should ignore it. Yeah. Because it doesn't matter. What does matter is what people actually care about. And if you're not speaking to that, then you're going to lose elections. But I think he did. I think he did a good job. He spoke to COVID. He spoke to the fact that he's like, he wants to get this virus under control. And that's like everybody's, the biggest thing on their mind.
It feels like he barely squeaked it out in a year when like, I feel like COVID should have been a landslide. So that was a little bit of a disappointment. Let's wrap it up on this, because I thought this was really interesting with just the mail-in ballots and the red mirage, as I feel like I heard in the polls leading up to this, and all the things I saw. We know that the polls are kind of bullshit, but I definitely heard a ton of people talking about these mail-in ballots. The president has been talking disparagingly about mail-in ballots. They're all corrupt. They're all trash. Don't vote by mail. Don't vote by mail. Don't vote by mail. And then, all these states have rules where like those ballots are being counted later. They get them beforehand, but they can't start counting them until election day. So now we're seeing states that day of the election, which was really terrifying to everybody. All these states were red that we thought were going to be blue. And now that they're finally counting the mail-in ballots, we're getting this like blue wave, quote unquote, coming in, wiping away what previously earlier in the day looked like red states. And then we're seeing all this like Trump backlash to that, where he's like, where are these votes coming from? This is corrupt. I was winning earlier in the night. Now all these states are blue. And it's like, but these are all the mail-in ballots that you told people not to vote by mail. And then when they started counting the mail-in ballots, you're shocked that you didn't get any. This is craziness. But
yeah, I think what we learned is that
I just pulled up the map here.
Yeah, we just pulled up the map.
We're doing it on Thursday night, so nothing's called for sure. It all looks good, but
yeah, although it looks like Georgia is. Oh man, Georgia is within. The margin hasn't gotten any smaller. It looks like they've almost done counting. So it looks like Trump is going to take Georgia by like maybe 2,000 votes.
The Daily was talking about today crazy. Was like it's going to be within 10,000 votes either way, which seems insane for a red state. I don't know exactly what's going on in Georgia. I'm curious to learn more about that eventually. But yeah, but the mail-in ballot thing, it seems like is huge. And maybe the whole election night thing is kind of a stupid thing, Pat. I don't know how you feel about that. But the idea of like the election night, especially with all these mail-ins, it just all can't be done in a night. The idea that we're all sitting around conditioned to watch the news and await and progress as it comes in is like kind of crazy, like it's done when it's done.
Yeah, I think that there is definitely something to be said for, I agree with mail-in ballots. I think you should be able to mail-in ballot. I think you should be able to do all this stuff. The more things that give access to more people to vote, the better.
It should be as easy to vote as possible. There should be a day off. It should be a national holiday. People should have like
should be mandatory.
It should. I mean, it'd be great if it was mandatory. I mean, poll hours. It'd be great if they didn't close at like 4:00 in some states. Right. It would be great if lines didn't last hours. I mean, if I was a Democrat in power, I would be doing everything I can to like make it easier for people to vote. That should be like a huge priority for them.
And they are. And I think that that's happening. They're definitely getting better at it. The lines in Georgia were like non-existent on election day when in 2017 they were like
it was a
hours and hours and hours long, so we've made some inroads on that side, on that front. We've definitely lost some stuff though too. But yeah, I mean, this is COVID. So like, obviously more people are mail-in voting. Like there is something to be said for this period of time when it's election night and to election week and month, maybe. It's like, this is a time of intense stress that is bad for all of us. It's bad for the country. It's bad for our health. It's bad for like,
it's terrible.
It's not knowing is oftentimes
so stressed
way worse
out
than the outcome.
All those posters about STDs on the subway were right. Not knowing is the worst part, Pat.
Yes.
Tell me if I have gonorrhea, right, AKA Donald Trump, or tell me if I have hepatitis C, AKA Joe Biden. Neither one of them is pleasant. I don't know the details of either one. Thank God. Ladies, I don't know anything about gonorrhea or hepatitis C. Have no personal experience with either one, not to brag.
Yeah.
And now Trump, we are still in, maybe things will be different tomorrow if you're listening to this pod on Friday or maybe later tonight. But Trump is saying all kinds of crazy shit about how these votes shouldn't be counted. He's gone out of his way to like, there's Republicans showing up at voting at like polling places demanding that votes stop being counted. He's tweeting, stop counting the votes. Like, this man is fucking insane. And half the country voted for a guy who doesn't want all of the votes counted. And there's a ton of misinformation out there. I mean, I saw, it was on Facebook, Twitter, and it's weird. I don't know if this is even the right thing to be doing, but I see some dumbass that I know from Florida posting about how like all these magical Biden ballots are like showing up when there's 5,000 registered, people, registered voters in a county, but there's 6,000 votes for Biden. And it's like, and then immediately under that, they're like, this information isn't accurate. Like the actual, there's more people have registered and like this like that is not a real thing. Like what you were saying is actually insane. And I don't know how helpful that is. I don't know if that actually changes anybody's mind. Maybe then they're like, Facebook's corrupt and Facebook's trying to take my stuff away. But it's like, people have been talking about this forever. It makes complete sense to me. I'm not shocked at all that people who are mailing in votes are more Democrat. And it's insane. It's absolutely insane that the president of the United States is actually demanding that people stop counting real votes cast by American citizens for his job.
I mean, Tim, this guy has been saying the most just fucking batshit crazy stuff for 4 fucking years.
I know, and I don't think anybody is genuinely worried that he won't give up the presidency because he can't. Like, he locks himself in the White House unless the military is somehow on his team. You know, whatever. Biden will stand in front of the White House, get sworn in.
Get those suckers and losers in here to protect me.
And get these fucking losers in here.
Where are those fucking losers? Get them in here.
He's got the military guarding him. And he's just like, I don't know why you would do this. It's a loss to me. This is a loss. Someone tries to kill me. They kill you first. That's an L for you.
Yeah.
I don't know why you would be doing this.
It seems like a waste of your time.
If I was you, I would not be doing this.
I was watching the press conference. He did not seem into it. He was reading off a page of like stuff that had been written by probably.
Well, I think yesterday he bought it. Yesterday he was talking about shit. Last night or like the night of the election.
I don't think he's really.
I think now he's been defeated. Well, you know why? Because Fox is defeated. Fox News is like kind of like bummed out now, and they see the writing on the wall. And he knows. I mean, he can't genuinely think that people are going to cancel the votes. I mean, he knows he's going to lose. What he is doing, though, which is still terrible, is he's casting doubt on the electoral process.
Yes.
And he's sowing distrust in this. And he's turning America against who their new president should be in a way that, like, I don't know, I've never seen before. I've never heard of before that, you know, there's a whole peaceful transition of power where the president like shakes the other person's hand and like passes it on. And that's part of what makes America great, right? Is that the leader of our country peacefully hands over the reins to whoever the country decides, regardless of whether or not you believe in that specific process. Whoever our system decides is the president, they peacefully become president, and that's it. And the fact that is even being jeopardized or questioned at all is like horribly frightening. And again, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter half the country. That's not important. That's genuinely not important to people. But it's the kind of like, I don't know, just like deep thought that like the more you think about it, the more you're like, oh my God, we are so fucked, you know?
Yeah. And I will end on this thought.
We'll end when I say so, Pat.
Okay, fine.
No, please wrap it up.
Sorry, I thought we were
almost done. I just refuse to give you the last word.
Minute. No, you're not. I won't take the last word. This is like what I want to say. The Democratic Party and make it funny too, because like this hasn't been a funny one. People like the funny ones, and this was not a funny drunk.
one.
Or I'm more drunk. I'm funnier. Yeah. Okay, here's how I'll put it. The Democrats need to be on 4chan. We got to get Democrats on 4chan. You got to get Democrats on 8chan. We got to start going out there and just getting in the shit with these people. You got to get into their heads and like take those kids that, you know, take a wrong turn. They have a bad year. They like have their family, their dad's losing their job and like they're struggling, you know, they're struggling at school. They're getting beat up at school. They take a wrong turn on the internet. All of a sudden they're in Charlottesville, you know, with tear gas and a big Nazi flag.
Tiki torches.
And like these people are not gone. These people are being lost every day, every hour, because they aren't getting a message from somebody else that's positive. And they're sticking to these places on the internet, which is why I don't like this guy. I really don't like this guy. But Pete Buttigieg is going on Fox News, and he's proudly going on Fox News and talking to people. We need to be on Fox News. We need to like go on to their, as much as they will have us, go on there and make our case. Go talk to people on that side. The darkest parts of the right need to be heard by Democrats.
Yeah.
And then you can start really talking about what actually matters. And because those people, they can be reasoned with. I do honestly believe it. I do honestly believe that those people who are out there in the streets screaming, all lives matter, did not feel this way in the same way their entire lives. And I think that we can turn it around if you can actually go and say, I want to talk to you about what's really going on. What's really going on is you're losing a lot of money.
Yeah.
And all that money is going straight to Amazon and straight to Walmart and straight to big corporations that couldn't care fucking less about you. And watching Trump have these rallies and then leave these people in the cold without buses to take them home. And
without masks.
If you can show the right, the disdain that the Republican elite has for its supporters, the disdain that they have for poor working class white people, how much Trump hates poor people. He is disgusted. He is disgusted by Mike Pence because he has pets, and he thought it was something. It was like podunk and poor. Like he had actually even a funnier line than that. And you should look it up. Anyone who's on the look up what Trump said about Mike Pence's pets, and you can see that this guy hates these people. He hates them. He goes to these rallies. He's like, I don't want to be in Erie, Pennsylvania. I fucking hate it here. I would never come here. Why the hell am I here? I'm never coming back. This place sucks. If we can go there and be like, Erie, Pennsylvania, we care about you. This guy doesn't care about you. The Republican Party doesn't care about you. But we want to be here and we want to figure out how to make your lives better.
I wonder what politician could say that and actually make me think they believe it. I mean, Bernie's the one I keep coming back to because I was like, oh my God, this is the guy. He's been saying the same thing for 40 years. It makes some sense. But the idea that
I think also because he's not a Democrat. And so he gets the cred. He gets the street cred on the Republican side by saying like, nah, I'm not one of them either.
I'm a democratic socialist.
Right. It's like, I'm not, but he's like, I don't think he's registered as a Democrat. I don't think that he's listed.
He's got to be a Democrat now. You can't.
I don't think
be like the Democrat, like the running in the primary.
He's not one. He's
really
like the whole. That's like a big thing about him. He's not actually a Democrat. But that's huge. That's street cred, man. That's
it is street cred. Like it's why the establishment hates him.
Yeah, people who are hated, get somebody to go in the streets into a big red area and say, "Hey, I hate the government just as much as you do because they're not doing anything that I want either. So let's work together." These guys suck.
We need people who are willing to burn it to the ground, but like rebuild it the right way.
Yeah. And I think the far left also feels that way. We're sick of establishment Democrats winning these freaking primaries. We're sick of like the same people over and over. We're like, this isn't working.
I hate it. I hate fucking Nancy Pelosi. I'm tired of seeing her fucking kneeling in kente cloths thinking she's like doing something. It's like pass some fucking laws, you dumb asshole. Do something. Make some real fucking change. It's like the posturing is exhausting. It's so funny to me. I mean, Bill Burr had like one of my favorite bits about like Michelle Obama like asking the American people to help out with something, and he's like, "Why don't you just look across the fucking dinner table at the most powerful man in the world?" And it's like, cool. So what the fuck are these like Democrats who are doing all this posturing? And it's like, fucking do something, actually make a difference. I don't know. Try to make a change. Yeah, you're right. I'm just caught up on this thing. I forget what I was going to say afterwards. Yep. But yeah, it just seems like
it's going to be hard. It's going to be really, really hard to break down some of these really, really intense and morally repugnant conversations we have to have. But you're going to have them. The Nazis don't go away. They haven't gone away since 1939. They're still here. Yeah. So we have to continue to have this conversation all the time. You think you don't want to. It's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to have to keep explaining to people that Jews are people like us and deserve respect.
And that being a Nazi is offensive. Not enough people have watched Raiders of the Lost Ark, They're just like
yeah, that's the
they haven't seen enough Indiana Jones movies. They're like, oh no, maybe the Nazi wins this one. And it's like, no. Indiana Jones isn't the Nazi. He's fighting the Nazis. And they're the ones who open the cradle and then get their faces melted off by whatever spirit's inside. Yeah. Indiana Jones actually loses in that movie. And like he's the last one to the treasure and the Nazis get it first and they kill themselves when they open it. I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's symbolic
Tim,
of something.
I've actually never seen it.
That's insane. We'll add to the list of 2 movies that you have seen. Yeah, man. There was a great scene in like The Boys. I know you didn't watch The Boys, but it was like kind of this like anti-superhero movie. No, it's a TV show on Amazon Prime. I talked about how great it was on the pod before, and they had something where they kind of like did some scenes that kind of perfectly embodied what I think a lot of this stuff is, and like how someone becomes a Nazi nowadays is like you're depressed, you're sad, you're angry, you're like I want to change my life. You're watching TV, people aren't talking about you or actually any real change that would affect you. You go on the internet, whatever the first thing you find is. what do you start gravitating towards? And all these things, I mean, the more like the research and digging I've done into like social media stuff and like the effect on your brain and everything like that is they show you what you want to see. And it's not like they're forcing strange ideas on you, but if you Google puppies, they're going to keep showing you puppy stuff. You know, if you're looking at QAnon stuff, they're going to keep pushing you towards QAnon stuff because they're trying to give you what you want. And it's super easy to be sucked into these weird rabbit holes of stuff. And if you aren't constantly like questioning everything, which seems like a crazy way to live, but it's kind of like the weird insanity defense of like, well, if I think I'm insane, then I can't be insane because an insane person wouldn't think they're insane. You know what I'm saying? Like, as long as you're like, I got to believe that there's something to like, am I in a bubble right now? Am I in like a thought bubble where I'm only getting the same content and the same ideas? Should I take a second and get out of this? Like, I think we should be thinking that way. I think everyone on every side should be like, I got to step outside here and just see what's going on the other channel. I got to know what's happening over there so that either I can like support my own beliefs or like expand my mind a little bit.
Yeah. And how are you putting your message to the test if you're not talking to people that vehemently disagree with you? Like, how are you not like
it's so frustrating. I love arguing with people. I love talking to people and I love hearing like new dumb ideas, you know, like I'm not to make it about like stand up or comedy or whatever, but like I would rather listen to like, I don't know, somebody go off about things that I disagree with than like somebody just regurgitating all my ideas back to me. Like, that's nothing. You know, if somebody says something fucking dumb or like completely different than I've ever thought before, it's like maybe I learn or maybe I get stronger in my own beliefs.
Yes.
And now I have a way to refute what he's saying.
Yes. And also, yeah, it just like you're not going to be strengthened in your ideas if you don't talk to someone who pressures them. And you're also not going to know how to really engage and convince people if you don't talk to them and try to convince them. I think I think as a person who has Trump supporting members in his own family, I have to constantly think about what's the language I come in? Because I can't come into Thanksgiving and be like, abolish the police. Blah, 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 blah.
Right.
Like I would just be, you know, it would be screaming or right now, instead of screaming, it is like, stop talking. It is stop talking about this. We don't want to start something. So it's this like repressive Irish Catholic thing where it's like, don't talk about it. We don't talk about it. Well, it's like, if we don't talk about it, then we can't flesh out our ideas and we can't actually, lean into our beliefs that we really do believe, or understand the ones that we are maybe on the fence about. So we have to be talking to each other. We have to be having really, really uncomfortable conversations. And some of those are going to end up being yelling, but we've got to do better.
Yeah. And I don't think it means you need to treat people awfully, to quote this dumb bitch I saw on Facebook saying we should all love each other. It's like, you know, we can disagree and still treat each other with some semblance of respect, you know, like you can talk to your grandparents and hear them say some bad shit and you can still be like, okay, grandma, I love you. Like, I wish you would vote Democrat. But if you don't, like, you know, I still care about you, you know, like it doesn't need to be mutually like completely exclusive.
And and on top of that, you can call out people when they are really saying hurtful things, but you can also say, hey, what you're saying right now, I don't know if you understand. Let's talk about what you said and let's talk about how that hurts people's feelings. Let's talk about what that word means. Let's talk about what that language means. Let's talk about the history of where that phrase comes from. Yeah. Let's talk about stuff that was kept from you when you were a kid, stuff that they didn't teach you in school, stuff about that happened in slavery and during the civil rights movement that they don't talk about. They don't talk about the stuff that happened, and so people think it wasn't that bad. People honestly believe that, like as we get further and further away from it, they start to forget that there was a period in time where
you could own another person.
Yeah, and even further away from that, there wasn't that long ago where people weren't allowed in the same room as people. Like that wasn't that long ago. It wasn't that long ago. You weren't allowed to sit where you were. You weren't allowed to people literally didn't have the same rights as other people. One of the things in the Cass book that I was reading, there's an interesting anecdote and I didn't know this, honestly, that white women were always to be referred to as Miss, but you would never refer to a black woman as Miss. It was auntie or like, their first name. So what happens is a African American man in the South, I think it was in Georgia, named his daughter Miss. And so she goes to school, and she gets in trouble at school. And the principal is like, "What's her name?" It's like, "My name's Miss." And he's like, "What's your fucking name? You know, like, don't fuck around. Like, don't fuck with me." She's like, "My name is Miss." Like, and it becomes this big thing. And it's just like, I had no idea that there's this like that sort of stuff. These like little things that like have existed and did exist and were part of like our culture and our country.
Yeah.
For a long time. And these are like little tiny things. It isn't like someone like, you know, we can talk about people being hung from trees and stuff, but like these are tiny little things, little oppressions here and where. And
yeah, I think the term microaggressions is like definitely overused on the left, but a lot of that stuff is like super real.
Yeah.
And a lot of the things that we take for granted were like, you know, stem from like really horrible stuff. And like, just because there's a little distance between it doesn't mean that it isn't. The impacts of it still aren't felt today.
Right. And take it away from, it's not your fault. Obviously, it is not your fault that racism exists, person who lives in 2020, or that slavery existed, person in 2020, because I think that's the retort that everyone like.
And I don't even know why you're talking about racism. It doesn't sway voters one way or the other. You know. So why the fuck are we even talking about racism?
I think it's like, you know.
But yeah, but I think you're right. You have to have these talks with people. I've come up with the phone number rule, which is just like, you know, get off the social media. Call somebody, you know, if you don't have someone's cell phone number, you aren't going to be able to change their mind on anything. So why the fuck are you even trying? You know, Don't post something, have a conversation with someone in your family or someone across the street who might like disagree with you. You know, I just watched this. What was it? Letterman's like Netflix thing where he does long sit down interviews with people. And he talked to Dave Chappelle, who I just, you know, think is the fucking best, just the best goddamn stand up comic living today for sure. And he lives in Ohio. He says like in amongst the whites, he says, but it's just, he's been living there forever and they all know him and he's built like a community there. And he's like done a lot to like bring it up. It's like in Yellow Springs, Ohio. And he was walking Letterman around and like talking about like giving back to the community and how the community is actually really supportive. And it's kind of this weird, like Bernie Sanders Island, who described it in like a sea of Trump supporters or whatever. But, you know, you had a line that I thought was great, which is like, you know, you can't change the world, but you can make a corner of it a nicer place. And I think that's kind of like a lot of this, maybe this election stuff, like, you know, and all these conversations we're talking about is you just start on like a smaller level. You talk to the people around you. You do what you can to like make the right moves on a local level. And hopefully that builds into something real, you know?
Yeah. And at the end of the day, humans are very emotional. We're all very emotional and we're all very nervous and tense, and let's recognize it and let's heal each other and let's care for each other, and not that we have to be nice to each other. Let's care for each other.
Right. Care
about the person who is like, care about the Nazi, because the Nazi is a person who is deeply troubled.
Yeah.
It was deeply caught up in the wrong place. The Nazi was a little boy once, was a little child.
Okay, we don't need to talk about that. I agree that nice and kind are two different things, you know? People will say nice shit to your face. It's like, fuck that, man. I want a kind person. Some of the kindest people I know say terrible shit.
Right.
It's like, that's fucking great. Okay, let's wrap it up. This is the longest one we've had.
Oh,
let's just
wasn't
stop.
Funny at all.
I don't think it was funny at all. I don't think this was a good one. I think this was fun.
I know. I'm still so tense.
I'm so tense. I'm freaking out right now.
Not even.
It's not even solidified. I don't know what's happening.
Oh God.
Wish it could have been funnier. You know what? Maybe later we'll do another one. Another one we'll just get shit.
It'll be way funnier when I get to yell at Joe Biden.
Yeah, we should do something shit. I don't know when the next reason to do this is, but people seem to like him, so I thought it'd be a good idea to run this back. Pat, thank you so much. I don't know when we're gonna do this again, but
I've had
we
fun.
will.
I hope everyone else did too.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Thank you for listening. Back with a regular episode on Tuesday. If you agree with anything we said or disagree with anything, let me know. I love new ideas. Email the show, call the show. Let me know. And the king stays king. Bye.